Well, hello dear friends. I have been looking around my little area that I use for crafting, and there have been a couple of pads of paper that I've taken what I wanted out, and now I'm left with the bits that I don't want. And so I've got a pad here of it's a small scrapbooking paper, 6 by 6, and a lot of these pages I would never use on their own, so I decided today is the day that I'm actually going to start making something with them, and just transforming them into something that I can actually use instead of having all of this lying around that I might never use. So I'm going to start off with the same process for each of the pieces of card, and I'm going to demonstrate this on one card, and then the process I'll do the same for all the others. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at the orientation of the design, because some designs have a vertical or linear design. Some designs you might want to use just in one direction, and then you have other pieces of card where it wouldn't really matter what you do in terms of the score lines. So for this particular one, because it's got lines that go in one direction, I'm going to use that as my guideline. I'm going to turn this over, and at the 1 centimeter mark I'm just going to score my card, okay, all the way down. If you don't have a scoreboard, you can measure it and then put a ruler here and then just bend your card up against the ruler. The next thing that I'm going to do is to make sure that I've actually flattened this really nicely, and I'm going to fold this over, and using my fingers as a guideline, I'm going to fold it over, line up the edges, and glue all those down. So let me go ahead and do that now. For this piece of card, I have just folded it down flat, so you can see on the inside here where I've glued it. I've folded down flat, and then I have marked off 2 sections, so they weren't exactly the same size, but similar. So you can see this one I've folded over and glued already. The next thing was that I cut away on each of the sections that I'd made a little half a circle punch, just so that I could get my finger in, because I'm going to make these into 2 little pockets. I have cut into the side of my piece of card here, down the edge where it was folded. I've angled 2 corners, and I've reduced the amount of bulk here so that I can actually glue this down like so. So my next thing will be to take some ink, and I'm going to use some walnut stain for this one, and I'm just going to quickly drag it around the white edges just so that they aren't so dominant. And I'm just using one of these little mini ink pads to do that, and I'm kind of smudging it on the inside here. I could also take a blending tool and just soften the edges on the inside as well. So I just want to do that before I start, and then I'm going to ink up these edges along the side here where they would obviously be facing forward, and around this little tab that I've got at the bottom. So you'll see on this one that I have already assembled, I've put an insert of another piece of card there. And for the second one, I've just glued down first that sort of little caramel color strip with a little brown one on top, and then folded that over. It just added an extra layer of detail, and I'm quite happy with those 2 little pockets. So those 2 little pockets could go into a journal, or you could actually mount them on something else so that you could almost have a layered effect. It's entirely up to you. So that is the first one out of our little scrapbook papers. So in this, I'm going to take my folded over pocket. I've rounded the corners using my little corner punch, and I have inked up all around these edges just using walnut stain. The next thing I'm going to do is to carefully fold this over, and I'm just taking a random amount of space. I'm not actually being too specific, I'm just using my eye to eyeball it. It is quite bulky at the bottom, so you want to just make sure that you're lining up your edges nicely, and you can use your fingers to help you with that, and then just press that down fairly firmly. So now I have 4 layers of card here, which is quite bulky in itself, and I'd like to secure them, so I'm going to use one of these little split pins. I know some people call them brads, but they basically have a split. So I'm going to use those to actually secure them, but I've got some tiny little ones here. Just trying to see if I've got a color I want to use here. There's a sort of like dirty brassy color. I think I'll use that if I can find another one. Come on, out you come. There we go. So I've got two of those little brassy ones which I think will marry in quite nicely. And I have a hat pin. You could use your crocodile or a punch to make a little hole, or you could actually use an awl. You want to make sure that your fingers aren't anywhere near where that little needle is coming through, or your awl, and you just have to wiggle it. You could use a nice large tapestry needle as well. I had a nice one in Cape Town where I'd actually glued the needle into a cork, so it actually was quite nice and strong. So I'm going to use my little split pin, push through both layers. I don't want a really big hole at the other side, which is why I've opted for this. I'm going to open them out and make sure that they lie flat, running in line with that, because I don't want that to cover across any area where I might put something in. I know there's a little bit of bulk here, but by the time you've tucked something in, you won't actually notice that. So using your eye just to guide you, I'm going to make another hole on the opposite side. Again, make sure your fingers are out the way, and then push your little brad through your split pin and open it out. If you don't have these tiny little brads, then if you use a longer one, just use a pair of pliers to clip the ends so that they don't stand out too much. Now I've got two nice little pockets, one longer one and another one, but because I haven't glued down the edges, I could tuck something in that space, and I could tuck something in through the sides here as well. So if I just had to take a very simple option here, let's put that in the big pocket, let's put that in the small pocket. That's option number one. And I did a second one previously where I've done these little stamped ephemera, and I could pop those in quite nicely as well. So you've got two nice little pockets. You can see they look slightly different if they're varied, but if you were doing a double page spread or you were working in the same journal, that would be quite nice. And just adding the little bit of hardware creates something difficult. You can go ahead and you can stick any kind of labels and things on there. You could do some stamping. That's up to you. This little pocket is a variation of the one that we've just done, where I actually just took two long pockets and I've folded them differently. So this one was quite a shallow fold. If you imagine that, I folded it about here just to get this long length, and you can see that's folded over from the outside forward. And then I took another little pocket and folded it just short of half, and on each of these little pockets I have made tabs where it was actually an old playing card, and then I stuck a piece of the second layer of a napkin, the one that's got what I call the shadow on it, and then I did some stamping. So that's done each of it. I've curled some of these edges just to make them look a little bit worn and tattered. I've inked them up. I've put some little brads on and added some little labels and things. You can go to town with this. So that's just a variation of the previous one. So for this fold over, I divided my length into 4 and folded them over and rounded the little corners so that I could make these little pockets. And then this was a cut edge here, I just ran a thin little strip of glue here just to seal the edge, and on one of them I've added that little tab, which is quite nice. And then you can see that by the time you've actually put a few little things into your tuck spot, I've got a little book I made here. These little things will just add nicely to your detail, and it will very much depend on the theme of your journal. And I've got another little book just out of scrap paper that I've popped in there. It'll probably change when I actually make a journal with these in mind. And then I have done some others where I've added a bit more in terms of embellishments to them. So for this particular one, I took some punched out magazine pages, stamped over it, add a little tab. This little brown was a frame that I got, so some of the pad of paper, which is this pad, had little things that you could push out, and this was a frame, so I just superimposed that. And then I've got a few little images that came out of this pad of paper that I'm just putting in for now because the colors are really nice and compatible. And then that one I've done also a little circle tab there, some little labels. I often talk when I'm doing flip throughs of magazines about keeping tiny little pictures and make them into focal points, and there's one that I've done. This one here too, I've also done a little circle tab, so even without something in it you can see that that actually looks really nice. And I try and make as many of my embellishments as possible, just because I can. So that one I did with some scrap paper. In fact, that was the back of one of Tim Holtz's packaging. I think I got some field notes ephemera in there. This was hand decorated paper that I'd done. The label was stamped and then just muddied up a little bit with some ink. So that is the next set that I've done. This is probably the simplest little pocket that I've done, because once we've actually folded the card to this stage, because these designs all have directional prints, in other words you'd lose them if you folded the page the other way, I've not been left with as many options as I was with the other, where the pattern was more all over. So for the first card, what I did was to fold the card this way around so that I got this lovely bicycle in, and on the reverse side of that you would have seen this design here. So the pocket itself was quite long to put anything in, so I cut it down so that I could actually use that section, and I've made that into this little pocket and just used some stamps and a little label, and then obviously distressed it with my walnut stain to create a nice little tuck spot there. This little one is open-ended at this stage because I do feel, because it's fairly long, it might be quite nice to put something that could actually come right the way through. So if I put this on the side of a page and I had something long to go through there, I would be able to do that. So I've just simply distressed that, not doing too much, but if push comes to the shove, if I wanted to do something I could seal that, I could cut out here with my little corner around it and make that into a pocket. So I'm leaving my options open there. This one, I took the same piece of card and I folded it this way around. Okay, so lengthways, and you'll see on the one side I have that nice pattern, so I could have used that as my front, or as I've chosen, I've just used that section of the bicycle to show forward. And I had previously stamped a whole lot of these little postal cards on some mixed media paper, so all I did was just to take that and distress it with a little bit of my walnut stain, and then I took some stamps. Oopsie. I just took that stamp and a couple of little words and stamped around it just to give it a bit more character. I have rounded the corners and I've cut out a little notch using my circle punch just so that I can get my fingers in here, because I'd like to use this as an envelope. The bottom I measured 1 centimeter in, cut away the excess where the inside would be, so I didn't have a very bulky flap, and all that remains for me to do on this particular one is just to put a little bit of glue here just to seal the edge. So it's inked around all the edges, and as I say, I don't have a particular journal in mind for this, so I'm not going to go ahead and put much more on it. But considering that I had quite directional paper with a design that couldn't be moved in too many different ways, I'm actually pleased with what we've got here. And I don't know, there's just something so charming about a bicycle with a basket of flowers and a few bits and bobs. It sort of reminds one a little bit about heading off on a lovely journey somewhere, and no fixed agenda. So please give me your thoughts and comments on this one. This idea, I thought I would cut these little sort of fold over pockets into two, so you can see that is exactly what I've done here, and in fact it was that way around, so I had the cut edge in the middle. I've used my corner rounder punch just to take the edges off here, and I've inked up all the edges, so all the way around on both sides, so I'm prepared. My thought with this was going to do two different things. The first one I could do would be to make this into a really giant tab, and I could glue that down completely on both sides, and then because I actually have some nice border pieces of card that came out of the same pad, I could glue something like that down, or I could create a whole lot of little imagery on either side of that so that I would have something that would actually just be a little bit different. The second thing that I thought I could do would be to do something like a little giant tab, but just only glue these edges down so that I could take things on either side of this and make this into a giant tuck spot. So yeah, you've got two options: either glue it down completely, decorate it as you wish, or make that into two little tuck spots with various pieces of ephemera. This folded over piece of cardboard, which was just from a 6x6 piece of scrapbook paper, I've divided in half and then into 4 sections. So I've got 8 little pieces of ephemera which I have cut out, and then with each of those I've done something different. So the first little one, I actually put some ephemera on the outside. I've inked all the edges, I've glued some book page with washi tape there to make a little booklet, and I've actually taken a corner cutout which is from a different piece of ephemera and stuck that on just as a decorative finish. So that's number one. The second one was to actually make a little corner pocket. So what I did was, before I glued this down, I cut the one half. Let me just see if I've got one. So for instance, I would have taken this before I corner rounded, cut that half, and then I've got that little triangle left over. I glued that on the edge just so that I actually had something that was decorative. I've stamped a little bit with this very lightly with a text stamp and made that into a decorative little pocket. I have this little one where I've rounded the inside corners where the spine or the fold is, and I'm not sure what I will do with that. I thought it could possibly just be a really oversized tab. This little one was just a very simple one where I just simply rounded the corners. I've done a little bit of inking with that text stamp, and I've got that as a little pocket. This one, I just simply glued the cut edge down, rounded the corners, and so I have, I don't know what you would call it actually, it's almost like a belly band. Oopsie, where's the open edge here? Goodness me. Okay, got an open edge, so it's almost like an open-ended pocket where I could slide something through, so you could pull that through from either side. So that's that little one. This one was also just a little pocket, and I rounded the corners, and I took my circle punch and made an overly large little circles there so that I could get things in and out. Let's do that way because that's quite bulky. This little one, I cut off a corner and just inked the background and put some ephemera in, and that's where I got that other edge for this one here. This was that piece that was cut off from there went onto there. Let's get this right, eh? Let's put that there. We can put that one there because it's a bigger one. And then the last little one out of this selection, I just simply folded the corner over on the one side, kept all the edges pointy, and then put a little brad in or a little split pin and glued that down. So that's fairly simple. Right, so that's all nice and tucked into place, and those are 8 little pockets and tuck spots and booklets just from one piece of ephemera. Or another way to be able to cut a long pocket, you've got to just be a little bit mindful of your design. So for instance, on this piece of paper I've got stripes to contend with, and I also have this lovely hydrangea flower. So if I was to fold it this way, it would give me 2 different sides that I could decorate, or if I was to fold it this way, it would give me top and bottom and that on the other side. You could have other directional card, which is like this, where I've chosen to bend the stripes sort of across the width, but you could do them lengthwise as well. So for this piece of card that I've folded over, I decided to cut it into 2 strips, which are like that. So I made sure that I got my hydrangea in the one, and then on the reverse I have drawn diagonal lines because I would like to create something with that. So I'm just going to snip through these diagonal lines, and I hope you can see them. I did draw them quite nicely in pen. Right, so I'm going to fold through that, and then I'm going to cut through this one here as well. You could use a guillotine if you wanted to. Alright, so now I have a whole lot of these. And you could either use them, if you wanted to, you could cut those smaller and maybe make them into little bits of bunting, or you could make them into little tuck spots. But let's see what they look like if I was just to glue the bottom of these. I've got a few nice little areas that I could use for tuck spots here, and I've got that lovely design here as well. I'm going to start to ink up the edges, and I'm going to play around with a little bit, see what I come up with, and I will show you the result. Well, this was a lot of fun doing this particular piece of ephemera. I really played around a lot. So I took one of my triangles that I had cut, and I opened it up down the middle so that I had two bigger triangles, and then I just kept folding this and cutting it until I had tiny little pieces, and I made out of those, whoopsie, these two little bits of ephemera, where I just had these small little triangles, and I put one in the front, one in the back, and just crisscrossed them like that. The idea with this is that I could use that as a border on something. So for instance, if I took a piece of, this is just folded book page which I've dyed, and I used a bit of texture paste and a stencil, I could actually use those as an edge on something like a belly band. I could use them for card making. I could use them on different color backgrounds. Let me just grab another one here, something like that, and you would see that these little strips would show up really nicely. So this was really just cutting my one triangle into smaller and smaller pieces, so that I could create something a little bit different. Nice way to actually use up all your scraps. I did the same with these triangles, but when they were slightly bigger, and you could continue on with these, making them into a bit more. So that's just making some tiny little bits of ephemera. Then I took one of my triangles and I inked up all my edges. I cut these two with my circle punch, and then I took the little pieces that had been cut out here, inked them up and put them on the outside as little tabs. I quite like that. It just is something just a little bit different. Why can't we have two little notches instead of just one? The next one with the triangles was to do something similar using the triangle, but instead of always having our pockets facing so that the straight edges is on a corner, I've decided to do it this way so that I've got a flat edge at the bottom or on the side of a page, but it gives me a triangular look. So for this one here, I would be wanting to glue it down along this edge here, like that. Oopsie. So if this was the bottom of a journal, I would put it in that way, or I could use it on the side of a journal like that. And then once the glue is dry, I would obviously ink that up as well. So let me put those two aside. This is along that same line, just using the triangle with a different notch at a different angle. So you can see those are the two different angles that you would normally work with, or that would be the third one. I'm just going to make a bit of space here so I can show you some of the others. Right, so we've done all of those. This one I glued a little bit of book page into my triangle, took the corner edges and folded them in, and just used some little brads to be able to secure them down. I didn't want to use just glue, I just felt that they needed something, and this would be really nice to use as a little tuck spot for journaling cards, or you could actually use it with two little separate pockets on either side. You could also, if you wanted to, fold this back and use that as a tab, where this would actually be a little pocket tab, and you could glue that onto a page, so you would have two separate openings. So I think that this one is actually pretty versatile in its application. Then I went a little bit further and I took my triangle, I folded over one corner just as I've done with this one here, and I glued that down. And then I took this top peak here and I cut from the outside edge just to the center line where this fold is in the middle, to along there, and I bent it over slightly more than half, because you can see that's where my fold is. Secured that with a brad, and the other one I bent down completely at half, so that I've actually got that glued down. This one is glued down on all sides, But this one I've folded slightly away from the center, so it's not quite in half. There would be my halfway point, and I will glue this one down here just along this little corner so that I've got another tuck spot. So it just looks different to what our normal ephemera does. So I've got a bit of book page through there. So just because this is still wet, I would, oopsie, that's quite a big one, isn't it? I could have a little tuck spot here, and then I could actually use this one here as well. Excuse me. And again, because you've actually folded your card already, that you could fold backwards as well and have that across a page as a little tab. So you've got a tuck spot there, and if you had something tiny, you'd be able to tuck it right through here from one end to the other. So that's quite versatile. This little one is a variation of that, where I've actually taken the corners, not folded them in quite halfway mark, just off center, and put a brad in, and then I've folded the point right down to the center, so I could slide something in right through across here if I wish to do that, or I could actually use these little pockets here. So I've got a few options there, and this could face in any direction. And this little one is also just a question of folding my points. So let me get the brads out so I can show you. This one I haven't gone ahead and put any book page in, because obviously you won't see an awful lot, but I did ink the inside edges. So this again was my triangle. This was where I had glued it. Fold the corners in, pop a little brad in, like that, and Bob's your uncle. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at this one. I just found this was really great fun to do, because it wasn't stuff that I'd ever seen on anybody else's channel. It wasn't the actual normal folds, but this one now allows you to actually use that as a pocket. This is a little pocket. You could glue it down flat like that if you wanted to, or again you could fold that over a page. You could do whatever you like, make it 3D. It's entirely up to you.